The hand's being, das Wesen der Hand, does not let itself be determined as a bodily organ of gripping, als ein leibliche Greiforgan. It is not an organic part of the body intended, destiné, for grasping, taking hold, indeed for scratching. Let us add even for catching, comprehending, conceiving, if one passes from greif to begreifen and to begriff. Heidegger could not let the thing say itself. And one can follow here, I have tried to do it elsewhere, the whole problematic of the philosophical metaphor, and in particular in Hegel, who presents the begriff as the intellectual or intelligible structure, reliving the sensible act of grasping, begreifen, of comprehending by taking hold of, by laying one's hand on, mastering and manipulating. If there is a thought of the hand or a hand of a thought, as Heidegger gives us to think, it is not of the order of conceptual grasping. Rather, this thought of the hand belongs to the essence of the gift, of a giving that would give, if this is possible, without taking hold of anything. If the hand is also, no one can deny this, an organ for gripping, Greiforgan, that is not its essence. It is not the hand's essence in the human being. This critique of organism and biologism also has the political destination I spoke of a moment ago. But does that suffice to justify this critique? Here, in effect, occurs a sentence that at bottom seems to me Heidegger's most significant, symptomatic, and seriously dogmatic. Dogmatic also means metaphysical, coming under one of those common representations that risk compromising the whole force and necessity of the discourse right here. This sentence in sum comes down to distinguishing the human Geschlecht, our Geschlecht, and the animal Geschlecht, called animal. I think, and I have often thought, I must underscore this, that the manner, lateral or central, in which a thinker or scientist spoke of the said animalness constituted a decisive symptom concerning the essential axiomatic of the given discourse. No more than anybody else, classic or modern, does Heidegger seem to me here to escape this rule when he writes, apes for example, my emphasis, have organs that can grasp, but they have no hand. Greiforgane besitzt der Affe, aber hat keine Hand. Dogmatic in its form, the traditional statement presupposes an empiric or positive knowledge whose titles, proofs, and signs are never shown, montré. Like most of those who, as philosophers or persons of good sense, speak of animality, Heidegger takes no account of certain zoological knowledge that accumulates, is differentiated, and becomes more refined concerning what is brought together under this so general and confused word, animality. He does not criticize it. He does not even examine the sort of presupposition, metaphysical or otherwise, it can harbor. This non-knowing raised to tranquil knowing, then exhibited as essential proposition about the essence of an ape's prehensile organs. An ape that would have no hand, this is not only in its form a kind of empiro-dogmatic apax legomenon, misled or misleading, in the middle of a discourse, keeping itself to the height of the most demanding thought. Beyond philosophy and science, in its very content, this proposition marks the text's essential scene, marks it with a humanism that wanted certainly to be non-metaphysical. Heidegger underscores this in the following paragraph. But with a humanism that between a human Geschlecht, one wants to withdraw from the biologistic determination, and an animality one encloses in its organobiologic programs, inscribes not some differences, but an absolute oppositional limit. Elsewhere, I have tried to show that, as every opposition does, this absolute oppositional limit effaces the differences and leads back, following the most resistant metaphysical dialectic tradition, to the homogeneous. What Heidegger says of the ape without hand, and then, as we are going to see, without thinking, language, gift, is not only dogmatic in its form, because Heidegger knows nothing about this and wants to know nothing, has no doubt studied neither the zoologists nor the apes in the Black Forest. It is serious because what he says traces a system of limits within which everything he says on man's hand takes on sense and value, since such a delimitation is problematic. The name of the man, his Geschlecht, becomes problematic itself, for it names what has the hand, and so thinking, speech or language, and the openness to the gift. Man's hand then will be the thing apart, not a separable organ, but because it is different, dissimilar, verscheiden, from all prehensile organs, paws, claws, talons. Man's hand is far from these in an infinite way, unendlich, through the abyss of its being, durch ein Abgrund des Wesens. This abyss is speech and thought. Only a being who can speak, that is, think, can have the hand and can be handy. In der Handhabung, in achieving works of handicraft. Nur ein Wesen, das spricht, denkt, kann die Hand haben und in der Handhabung Werke der Hand vollbringen. Man's hand is thought ever since thought, but thought is thought ever since speaking or language. That is the order Heidegger opposes to metaphysics. Only when man speaks does he think, not the other way around, as metaphysics still believes. Doch nur insofern der Mensch spricht, denkt nicht umgekehrt, wie die Metaphysik es noch meint. The essential moment of this meditation opens onto what I shall call the hand's double vocation. I use the word vocation to recall that in its destination, Bestimmung. The hand holds on to speaking. This vocation is double, but gathered together or crossed in the same hand to show, montrer, or point out, zeigen, zeichen, and to give or give itself, in the word, the monstrosity of the gift or of what gives itself. But the work of the hand, das Werk der Hand, is richer than we commonly imagine. Meinen, we believe, have the opinion. The hand does not only grasp and catch, greift und fängt nicht nur, or push and pull. The hand reaches and extends, receives and welcomes, reicht und empfängt. The German consonances must be heard. Greift, fängst, reicht, empfängt. and not just things. The hand extends itself and receives its own welcome in the hand of the other. The hand holds, held. The hand carries, tracked. This passage from the transitive gift, if such can be said, to the gift of what gives itself, which gives itself as being able to give. Which gives the gift, this passage from the hand that gives something to the hand that gives itself, is evidently decisive. We find again a passage of the same type or the same structure in the following sentence. Not only does man's hand point out and show, but man is himself a sign, a monstrous sign. What begins the citation and the interpretation of mneno syne on the following page. The hand's design and signs, zeichnet, presumably because man is a monstrous sign, ein Zeichenist. Two hands fold into one, a gesture meant to carry man into the great simplicity. Einfalt. I am not sure of comprehending this sentence that plays on sich falten and Einfalt, whether it be a matter of prayer or of more common gestures. What matters above all is that the hands can touch each other as such in auto affection, and even at the touch of the other's hand in the gift of the hand. This implies that the hands can also show themselves. The hand is all this, and this is true handwork. Das eigentliche Handwerk. And commonly we go no further, but the hand's gesture, Gebärden, a word worked over very much by Heidegger in other texts too, run everywhere through language or through the tongue, in their most perfect purity precisely when man speaks by being silent. And only when man speaks does he think, not the other way around, as metaphysics still believes. Every motion of the hand in every one of its works carries itself through the element of thinking. Every bearing of the hand bears itself, gebärdet sich, in that element. All the work of the hand is rooted in the thinking. Therefore, thinking, das Denken, itself is man's simplest, and for that reason, hardest Handwerk, if it would be properly accomplished. Eigens. End of quote. The nerve of the argument seems to me reducible to the assured opposition of giving and taking. Man's hand gives and gives itself, gives and is given, like thought or like what gives itself to be thought, and what we do not yet think, whereas the organ of the ape or of man, as a simple animal, indeed an animal rationale, can only take hold of, grasp, lay hands on the thing. The organ can only take hold of and manipulate the thing insofar as, in any case, it does not have to deal with the thing as such, does not let the thing be what it is in essence. The organ has no access to the essence of being, étant, as such. For lack of time, I must refer to a seminar already of long standing, in which we had been able to problematize this opposition between giving and taking, or two ways of taking, human and animal. Only the human would be granted the possibility of giving. Nothing is less assured than the distinction between giving and taking. At once in the Indo-European languages we speak and the experience of an economy, symbolic or imaginary, conscious or unconscious, all of these values remaining precisely to be re-elaborated from the precariousness of that opposition of the gift and of the grip, of that gift that presents and the gift that grips or holds or takes back, or the gift that does good and of the gift that does bad, of the present and of the poison. Gift, same word, or pharmakon, etc. For lack of time, I shall not analyze anymore the immense role of the hand, or the word hand, more or less directly plays in the whole Heideggerian conceptuality since Sein und Zeit, notably in the determination of presence according to the mode of Vorhandenheit or Zuhandenheit. The first is translated more or less well in French by étant subsistant, and better in English by presence at hand. The second by être disponible, as being available, like a tool or implement, and better since the English can keep the hand, by ready to hand. Readiness to hand. Dasein is neither vorhanden nor zuhanden. Its mode of presence is otherwise, but it must indeed have the hands in order to relate itself to the other modes of presence, Stimmungen. The question posed in Sein und Zeit gathers together the greatest force of its economy in the German idiom. And in that idiom, in the Heideggerian idiom, it is not Vorhandenheit founded, fundiert on Vorhandenheit. Literally, what is the relation to the hand that founds the other in relation of Dasein to the being of beings that is not Vorhandensein and Vorhandensein? What hand founds the other? The hand that is related to the thing as maneuverable tool, or the hand as relation to the thing as subsisting and independent object. Here I cannot reconstitute either the stake of this question decisive for the whole strategy of Sein and Zeit, or Heidegger's original course for deconstructing the classical order of foundation. But as this whole passage is also an analysis of handen, of the action or the practice as gesture of the hand, in its relation to sight, and thus a placement in a new perspective of what is called the praxis, theoria opposition, praxis theoria opposition. Let us recall that for Heidegger, practical behavior is not a-theoretical. And I'm only going to cite some lines in order to draw out two guiding threads.
Do the same. Go back. Can you take this?
Ska jag ta med boken? The Greeks had an appropriate term for things, pragmata. That is to say, that which one has to do with zu tun, in one's concernful dealings, in besorgenden Umgang, praxis. But ontologically, the specificality, pragmatic character of the pragmata is just what the Greeks left in obscurity, in dunken. In some, the Greeks were beginning to leave Vorhandenheit of the tool in obscurity to the benefit of Vorhandenheit of the subsisting object. One could say that they were inaugurating the whole classical ontology while leaving a hand in the dark. While leaving a hand to bring umbrage to the other. While substituting in a violent hierarchizing one hand experiences for another. They thought of these proximally as mere things, blosse Dinge. We call those entities which we encounter in concern, in besorgen, equipment, or Zeug. In our dealings, in common life, in Umgang, in daily and social surroundings, we come across equipment for writing, sewing, working, transportation, measurement. The kind of being which equipment Zeug possesses must be exhibited. The clue for doing this lies in our first defining Umgrenzung, delimiting, what makes an item of equipment, namely its equipmentality, Zeughaftigkeit, end of quote. This mode of being will be precisely Zuhandenheit. And Heidegger begins, in order to speak about it in the following paragraph, by taking up examples that he has in a way near at hand. The writing desk, the pen, ink, paper, what is happily called le sommaire in French, the blotting pad, the table, lamp, furniture, and his eyes looking up a bit above his hand writing, the windows, doors, the room. Here now are two threads I would like to draw by hand from this text in order to make them guiding threads, clues, or in order to sew and write also a bit in my manner. Well done, Jacques. 1. The first concerns praxis and pragmata. I had already written all this when John Sallis, whom I want to thank for this, drew my attention to a much later passage in Heidegger. It punctuates in a gripping way this long maneuver that makes of the path of thinking and of the question of the sense of being a long and continuous meditation of on the hand. Heidegger always says on the thought that it is a path, on the way, unterwegs, but on the way, on the march, the thinker is unceasingly occupied with the thought of the hand, long after Sein und Zeit, which does not speak thematically of the hand while analyzing Vorhanden and Zuhandenheit, but 10 years before Was heißt denken, which themizes these, there is a seminar on Parmenides in 42 to 43. That takes up again the meditation on pragma and praxis. Although the German word Handlung is not the literal translation of pragma, it just touches, if one comprehends well, it meets the primordially essential being of pragma, das ursprünglich wesentliche Wesen von pragma. Since these pragmata present themselves as Vorhandenen, zu and Zuhandenen, in the domain of the hand, all the motifs of Was heißt denken are already in place. Only the being that, like man, has speech, Wort, mythos, logos, and can and must have the hand, thanks to which prayer can occur, but also murder, the salute or wave of the hand, and thanks, the oath and the sign, vink. Hantverk in general, I underscore for reasons that will appear later, the allusion to handslag, the handshake, or what is called shaking on it with the hand, that grounds. Heidegger says the alliance, the accord, the engagement, Bund. The hand comes to its essence, West, only in the movement of truth, in the double movement of what hides and causes to go out of its reserve. Verbergung, Entbergung. Good turns. Moreover, the whole seminar is devoted to the history of truth. Alithea, Lithi, Lathon, Lathes. When he says already, in this same passage, that animal has no hand, that a hand can never upsurge out of paw or claws, but only from speech. Heidegger specifies that man has no hands, but that the hand occupies, in order to have in hand, man's essence. Nej, det behöver inte stoppa någonting. Jag kan bara se om du kan stänga det här larmet där borta just nu. Der Mensch hat nicht Hände, sondern die Hand hat das Wesen des Menschen in. 2. The second thread leads back to writing. If man's hand is what it is in speech, or the word, das Wort, the most immediate, the most primordial manifestation of this origin will be the hand's gesture for making the word manifest, to wit, handwriting, manuscripture, handskrift, that shows, montre, and inscribes the word for the gaze. The word as drawn or inscribed, eingezeichnet, and such that it shows itself thus to the gaze. Und so dem Blick sich zeigende is the written word that is writing. But the word as writing is handwriting. Das Wort als die Schrift aber ist die Handschrift. Instead of handwriting, let us rather manuscripture, for don't forget the writing of the typewriter against which Heidegger is going to raise an implacable indictment is also a handwriting. In the brief history of the art of writing, he sketches in a paragraph, Heidegger sees the fundamental motif of a destruction of the world. Or speech, Zerstöring des Wortes. Typographic mechanization destroys this unity of the word, this integral identity, this proper integrity of the spoken word that writing manuscripts at once, because it appears closer to the voice, or the body proper, and because it ties together the letters, conserves and gathers together. I stress this motif of gathering together for reasons that will also appear in a moment. The typewriter tends to destroy the word. The typewriter tears, eintreist writing from the essential domain of the hand, that is, of the word, of speech. The typed word is only a copy, Abschrift. And Heidegger recalls that first movement of the typewriter when a typed letter offended the rules of etiquette. Today, the manuscripted letter is what seems culpable. It slows down reading and seems outmoded. The manuscripted letter obstructs what Heidegger considers a veritable degradation of the word by the machine. The machine degrades, degradiert, the word or the speech it reduces to a simple means of transport, verkehrsmittel, to the instrument of commerce and communication. Furthermore, the machine offers the advantage for those who wish for this degradation of dissimulating manuscripted writing and character. In typewriting, all men resemble one another, concludes Heidegger. The path according to which the denunciation of the typewriter increased and specified itself would have to be followed closely. Finally, the typewriter would dissimulate the very essence of the writing gesture and of writing. Die Schreibmaschine verhüllt das Wesen des Schreibens und der Schrift. This dissimulation or this veiling is also a movement of withdrawal or subtraction. The words entziehen, Entzug often recurs in this passage. And if in this withdrawal, retrait, the typewriter becomes zeichenlos, without sign, unsignifying, signifying. That is, because it loses the hand. In any case, it threatens what in the hand holds speech safe, garde la parole, or holds safe for speech the relation of being to man and of man to beings. The hand handles, die Hand handelt, the essential co-belonging, Wesenszusammengehörenheit of the hand and speech, man's essential distinction, manifests itself in this, that the hand manifests precisely what is hidden, and the hand does this precisely in its relation to speaking. By showing, montrant, and by writing, by pointing to signs that show, or rather by giving to these signs or these montres, forms called writing. Sie zeigt und zeigen zeichnet und zeichnet die zeigenden Zeichen zu Gebilden bildet. Well, that was a tough sentence and a half. Diese Gebilde heißen nach dem Verbum Graphin, die Grammata. I think this has similarities as we talked about some other time, 1 year ago, about the signature that is done by the hand, and that we still to this day in court, legal documents, contracts, we have to sign. And a signature is a quite different thing from something written. It shows yourself. It sort of is the essence of what is you. And it's an act. Everything needs to be signed in testimony of other people. Without that testimony, it wouldn't be a signature as such. It would lose its power. So it's a public thing too. It's an act. And somehow maybe going from handwriting to typewriter to computer, we lose the process. That is a word, something that we do. All of a sudden, the words seem to be happening by themselves. They become maybe emasculated or soulless. Could this be the transcendental way of writing through a computer? I don't know. These are just thoughts that popped on my head when I read the text. A most brilliant text as well, I would say. But it's fantastic because this gives me new insight into Vorhanden and Zuhanden. I see that the seed was already dormant, already from the beginning. And Dasein is neither Vorhanden, Zuhanden. It is free and living. It is only when it becomes only one other thing that it disappears. And of course, today the most common is to become only Vorhanden, and therefore the soul disappears. It dissolves as Heraclitus would have it. Very interesting. Thank you very much, and have a very pleasant afternoon.
I repeat the title of the article. It's Geschlecht 2, Heidegger's Hand.
Geschlecht 2, Heidegger's Hand, and it's edited by
John Sallis.
John Sallis.
The Construction and Philosophy.
I will put it in the description as well.